As console prices just keep rising, this might be the right time to jump into the retro handheld market for a much more affordable alternative. In today's episode, we're talking new games, old games, and how indie games might hold the creative key to the future of game development. Let's go. The Game Adventure Podcast is a weekly family-friendly show keeping you up to date on all the latest news in video games. We'll also mix in a heavy dose of nostalgia with retro games and even things like how the worlds of tech and culture and even faith interact with video games as an art form. We're doing it all in less than an hour every Saturday morning, so let's get started. What is up, everybody? Hope you're having a fantastic week as we're heading into a holiday weekend next weekend. We'll actually be taking a week off from the show. This is episode 17, and this is the first break that we've taken from doing this weekly for the 4th of July next weekend. But this week, man, it's been a week for news. We've had a lot of kind of depressing news across the industry, price hikes, and also lots of layoffs. So let's go through this kind of not so nice industry news first, and then we'll jump into some of the a little more fun retro the things happening in the retro space with some new handhelds that are coming out. In a lot of ways, it's been a really difficult year to be, for sure, in the gaming industry, but also just kind of watching it from afar as a fan of video games. We keep seeing these like price increases to the hardware as this shortage on chips and memory continues, and then also just watching the video game industry try to figure out who and what they are. And we definitely saw that hit pretty hard in the news this week. So let's start with Xbox. The big piece of news last week was that Xbox was closing a handful of the studios that they had acquired over the last number of years, including Compulsion Games, Ninja Theory, and Double Fine. Those studios had been responsible for some of their kind of like mid-tier games that they offered through Xbox Studios. And this follows up a couple of years of Xbox just acquiring one studio after another. Now it appears that they're kind of starting to clean house. And so what happened this week was increases to hardware, significant increases. This would be the third increase for Xbox in this console generation, which is just absolutely unprecedented. It's wild. We've never seen the prices of electronics like this go up over the lifetime of that generation. So Xbox Series X and S increased their prices by up to $150 worldwide and completely discontinued even one of their models, the 2 terabyte model of the Xbox Series X. And so this kind of like massive pricing restructure happens immediately after those developer layoffs. And so that's kind of, I think, why this news story hit the way that it did this week. So the Xbox Series S is actually going up to $499. The Series X is going to be $799 effective August 1st. So my goodness, if you want to get an Xbox, you best get it now because they are going to raise the prices in about a month. A lot of the conversation around this has been pointing out the timing of how bad it looks, and that's certainly true. The PR around this is just undeniably bad. It's making Xbox look like this really highly volatile environment for any certainly any indie studio that's looking to partner with a bigger brand like Xbox is probably reconsidering that at this point. But let's look at kind of the actual economics. Microsoft has historically subsidized these consoles at a $100 to $200 loss, which means they actually sell the console for less than it costs to manufacture the console. And that's been pretty normative across the industry for a while. Whether or not that's a good business practice, that's what they've done. They get some kickbacks from the companies that are holding games on their consoles, and they also make a lot of money off of the games that are on Xbox because a lot of them, historically at least, have only been on Xbox. So that's where they make their money back, is in the games. They figure if we can get them into our system and keep them there, we're going to make money off of the games that they play. However, there's this global AI boom that is driving up the manufacturing component costs across the entire tech sector. Like, nobody is exempt from this. Even Apple announced we're going to have to raise the prices on iPads and iPhones because of this chip shortage. This is an economic reality. I think it's kind of silly to say, let's make Xbox out to be the bad guys. We can definitely question the way that they have acquired these studios and then let them go. But I think it's reasonable to look at the bigger story of what's going on here, and it becomes quite apparent that Xbox cannot continue. They might be able to sell a console at $100 to $150 loss, but when we start eking up to actually like $300, you're losing as much money as you're gaining from certainly the first year of game sales. Okay, we can't continue to do that. That's just bad business. So it stinks, but that's the way that things are. Then you have over on the Sony side, Bungie announced a little while ago, Destiny 2 is starting to wind down. They're not going to continue to support Destiny 2. And so that was a big piece of news a little while ago. They're shifting over to their other extraction shooter, Marathon. So that really stinks. And part of this is just how business works. But the real tragedy here is how Bungie went from being this incredible company responsible for the likes of Halo and got kind of squeezed into this, squeezed and sold in the corporate profit machine instead of continuing to focus on the art form of video games, what made it successful in the first place. So this feels to me a lot like a Hollywood studio that, acquires the rights to a movie franchise and just continues to pump out sequels that never quite live up to the hype of the first. And you end up with these soulless sequels that have just been made for the sake of money, and you can tell. And there's no art left in it. And so it feels like that's what's starting to happen here. You go from a studio that was responsible for Halo to making Destiny 2. And now it's turned into more of a hunt for how can we make profit. Live service games like Marathon are kind of what they thought was going to be the ticket. And the people behind the studio, the ones that were funding it, did not, it looks like, understand fundamentally what video games were supposed to be about in the first place. What's weird is that Sony has doubled down on the live service framework. So the CEO of PlayStation said that these live service games are the key to PlayStation's entire corporate future, which just doesn't quite land right after losing a number, 300 jobs at this studio that they had acquired, to say that, but we're still going to stick to our guns and live service is the future of the brand. It starts to feel a little bit like, if you remember the movie Black Sheep, there's this one spot where Chris Farley's character turns to David Spade's character and says, what did you do, Richard? After he single-handedly has destroyed the vehicle that David Spade loves in the movie. It kind of feels a little bit like that. The doors are falling off this once really awesome vehicle video game making studio. The doors are falling off and the fenders are dented, and the responsible party turns to them and says, what did you do? As they lay off, 30% of the workforce. I don't know. I hope that that's not kind of the end of Bungie, but it does increasingly look like it's going to be really hard for Bungie to come back as a studio. And I don't know that they're completely to blame for that. So that's kind of tough. As we look at, PlayStation as a hardware developer, we have console sales that have pretty much also collapsed. It's been kind of a bad month or so for Sony. PlayStation 5 sales hit a 26-year low this month, as you look at a monthly how many consoles they sold. And Xbox actually recorded its lowest monthly hardware unit sales for May in the entire history of the platform. So certainly the increase in expense for these consoles is starting to stop people from buying it. This isn't like a surprise dip, though, when you saw that PlayStation just raised the price on their consoles. And so you had this very predictable, oh, the price is going to go up. And so a bunch of people buy and they have a great month of sales. And then the price does go up and the sales crater because now it's more expensive and people have no reason to jump in. So all that to say, it's a tough moment in history to be looking for a video game console. One little bright spot is that Epic Games has been working on a relaunch, like an overhaul for their store, fixing a lot of complaints. Some of the things that they're including are like 5 times faster boot execution times, so things start up quicker, native user reviews, and also third-party developer patch notes. So these are a lot of really consumer-centric changes that they're making, which is awesome. I love to see them continuing to work on this, and adding user reviews we've talked about before is a really, really important move in helping the consumer sort through like the junk that gets released on various platforms. So they're certainly like copying from Steam's homework, and I'm totally fine with them doing that to improve their service. So let's jump over to the tech update for this week. The biggest tech release this week was the Steam Machine price announcement. Valve officially launched the price for its living room PC, the Steam Machine, and it was high. And so this is a high-end system that is engineered to kind of fit seamlessly inside your home entertainment center and handle, 80 to 90% of your Steam library right out of the box. And the price was $1,049. Which I think the conversation I saw from the media was kind of hyperfixated on how unbelievably high this price point was. And they were largely comparing it to consoles, which are also high, and saying, this is way too high. Nobody is going to be able to afford to get this. But I think they're comparing it to the wrong thing, honestly. They're comparing this computer to a locked up home console. This is not a console. It's a computer. You can't, the bottom line is you can't manage your professional workflows and organize your family's media files and do all that on a PS5 or a Xbox. And so given that the massive component shortages that are being driven by this like AI enterprise demand, these data centers are really driving up the cost of things by just demanding a lot of resources and buying up the market. Building a brand new small form gaming desktop for under $1,000, I challenge you to do that. Actually, hopefully some people take me up on that challenge and go and create some like tutorials, YouTube videos. This is how you can build your own Steam box. But I think what you're going to find out is that you will not be able to do that very easily for under this price with new components. I'll add that as a caveat. So I was able to build a gaming PC a couple months ago by buying used parts one at a time on eBay. I think I did buy a new case because I wanted it to look nice. It's in our living and dining room, and so I didn't want it to be a junky old case. But I think I ended up having to buy a new motherboard to fit into it because the one that came with the used PC that I got everything else out of was no good. So I spent a couple $100 putting this together, but I scoured the internet and spent hours troubleshooting and making it function. So that's great. But I definitely put a lot of hours of labor into that. I definitely did not come in under 1,000 if I would have counted all of my labor hours going into trying to make that function. So I just think we're comparing apples to oranges when it comes to the Steam Machine. I don't think my wife was saying that they just bought new computers for work, and all of these computers, just from a standard laptop standpoint, were well over $1,000. So I don't know that given the current pricing environment that $1,000 for a Steam Machine is really insane or shocking to me, at least. And I think we're comparing it to the wrong things. So that's my thoughts on that. And I'm excited to see how well these perform for consumers. The last like tech announcement was this MSI Claw 8. This is the title is MSI Claw 8 EX AI Plus handheld. This is MSI's official like premier handheld. It's using Intel's new Arc G3 Extreme processor. It is supposed to be a high-end portable gaming PC in your hands, basically. And what's weird is I saw this announced. I didn't hear anybody make a big deal out of the price. And the price on this is $1,800, which to me, that is an insane amount to spend on a gaming handheld. And so most of the reviewers are talking about there's a raw performance jump that's amazing. However, it is relying a lot on AI multi-frame generation. So this isn't the same as like overlaying AI graphics on top of the actual graphics. This is adding frames to increase the frames per second that you can handle on a mobile device. However, while this is a good technology to utilize to kind of push mobile hardware forward, it's also been noted that it really eats up battery power on this thing. And so the real consumer issue when it comes to handheld devices is not necessarily how far can I push the graphics on this tiny little screen. It's how long can I actually play this game before I need to go find something to plug it into. So I don't know that MSI has completely like found the balanced approach to that with this particular piece of tech. And the price is unbelievably high, but I guess that's what you pay when you want something at the bleeding edge of technology at this point in history, especially. So now that we've talked about some new stuff and some kind of depressing, sad stuff, let's jump over to the Retro Rewind, where we find a haven for ourselves a little bit in the retro space. If you are a Sonic the Hedgehog fan, this is kind of a big year for you because this is the 35th anniversary of it coming out on the Sega Genesis. And Sega has partnered with a boutique distributor, I Am 8-Bit, to manufacture these fully playable, limited edition, physical Genesis cartridges to celebrate Sonic's milestone. So this, I think, marks a positive trend of Sega actually jumping into this like physical retro hardware market rather than just leaving that space to the digital emulator storefronts. And so I applaud Sega for doing this. I think this is something that more of these companies need to take advantage of, that the people who are interested in like the retro video games, these games from the late 80s, early 90s, are now adults that still, while we want to be able to play the games still, we also love the physical, like tactile. I can touch it and I can hold it and put it on a shelf. And, you know, a lot of us are now full-grown adults with families, but some of us have an office where we can keep this kind of stuff. And so I think Sega is smart to jump into this space. What I don't love about it is the price. They are charging $99 for this like physical cartridge. And I think it's great that they're supporting the physical collectors, but $100 is a luxury price for something that is probably just going to sit on a shelf, even though it's playable. If you're an everyday retro fan who just wants like the joy of having this thing to remember this game by, or even being able to plug it into your old Sega Genesis and play it, a quick search on eBay will land you an authentic 1991 Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis cartridge, and they're usually like $20. All right, you can find some pretty good deals on these. Yeah, if you want the graded in really good condition, you might spend more on that. But for $100, you can get a real nice copy of the original video game. So I would maybe encourage you to do that instead. In the emulator space, we had a couple of emulator handheld pieces of hardware that were announced this week. So the AYANEO, I think is how you pronounce this, made the Pocket Micro 2, and they're talking about the launch for that. This is going to be their premium, like very compact, think like Game Boy Micro size, the Game Boy Advance Micro, but it's an Android handheld. and they are announcing that they're making it. However, the global launch is going to be only 100 units. And I had to reread that to make sure I wasn't getting that wrong. They are basically making this very difficult to get. So I love that they're making this thing. It's got a Snapdragon 865 processor, which is fast enough to run a lot. It's got a 3.5 inch 3x2 borderless display. Looks very nice. Has internal cooling. Has the TMR analog joystick. So this is like a tiny but really nice piece of hardware. And the price is $239. So pretty reasonable for the kind of tech that's been crammed into this and the use that you'll get out of it. However, it sold out obviously immediately when it launched yesterday. So that's kind of dumb that they're only doing this like micro run because it opens the door for scalpers to really take advantage of the situation. But I think clearly they're going to release more of these over time. So if you're willing to be a little patient and wait for them to put out some more, this might be a good one. Another one that you might consider would be the Retroid Pocket Nova. I've talked about Retroid before. They make fantastic hardware. And they did the perfect release, announcement for this, where they like slow drip the pictures. They show you the frame, and then they show you just a couple of the buttons, and then the screen turning on, which is this amazing looking OLED screen. If I were in the market for a retro like handheld, I'm not. I'm quite happy with the one that I have, but this would be the one that I'd be looking at. So it's got a 4:3 aspect ratio, which is perfect for retro games, especially retro handheld. It's got built-in dual screen software compatibility. So my guess is they're going to add some sort of attachable second screen to play your DS games. And the price is $229, which is really reasonable for the hardware that is packed into this little handheld. Looking at probably a Q3 release this year, so later this fall, you should be seeing some more information on this becoming available. Retroid does a great job with their hardware, and I am happy to recommend their stuff to you. So the next one is another company that you probably recognize if you've bought any gaming accessories. 8BitDo has made some fantastic controllers, and they made a piece of anniversary gear because this year is the 30th anniversary of the N64. And so they have manufactured this translucent, they call it water blue. If you remember the Xboxes, goodness, the N64s that are like translucent from the 90s. They made one that mimicked that like clear plastic, and it's a keyboard, and there's a wireless controller that matches it. They've changed like the arrow keys to be the yellow arrow keys. They've got some of the buttons that are the right color for the N64 controller. It's so cool looking. Pre-orders open up in late 2026, so you will see this become available a little later this year for pre-orders. I'll admit I am very happy with my ergonomic keyboard that I type on. I have to like really be careful about ergonomics for my body. I just need to take care of myself because I spend a lot of time at a keyboard. So I don't know that I would use this for every day, but it's so cool looking. It definitely makes me want it, even if I don't buy it. So if you're looking for a new keyboard and you love the N64, this might be something to keep your eyes peeled for. Pre-orders will probably be through 8BitDo's website. If you're a fan of Legos, Lego made a Sega Genesis kit a year or so ago, and they've also done the official like NES and Atari kits, and these are clearly models that are created with Legos, and they look exactly like the original system. They're now making one for the PlayStation 1, which is very cool looking. Release window is somewhere later in this year, late 2026. Some people are complaining about it not being like functional anyway. If you've looked at Legos recently, there's these new like interactive type of Legos. I don't usually talk about toys on the show, but this it's a crossover, so we have to talk about it a little bit. But I don't expect my Legos to be like interactive with me on a tech level. They're Legos. It's actually supposed to be kind of a break from the tech. for me anyway. And so these are high-end models. They're going to be put together and then probably put on my shelf as a display. So I don't need, interactivity, that kind of functionality from my Lego set. So I would be quite happy to have one like this. I just dug up my old PlayStation from a box in the closet. And so I might have to actually get that on display somehow. Because otherwise I'm going to be going to spend $200 on this Lego kit, and ain't nobody got money or time in my household to put together that kit. So you do what you want. If Lego's your jam, you send me pictures, okay? Echo the Dolphin has a new physical deluxe edition that is being released as part of this full remaster of the original 1992 Sega Genesis title. And then they're also releasing it along a brand new Echo the Dolphin 3 contemporary sequel. This is supposed to happen sometime late this year, early next year. It'll certainly be on PC and might come out on consoles as well. That's kind of a cool thing to see. And the Sega Genesis app on the Nintendo Switch Online would be a great place for this full trilogy package to eventually land. I hope that comes to fruition, but I guess we'll wait and see. For the POV topic that I've got this week, I want to go back and talk about some of these price rises in consoles, but also talk about how we might need to take a little bit of responsibility for that. So it seems like every single week we talk about these rising prices for a whole bunch of different types of technology, the rising cost of games. Every single week, our feeds are choked with kind of the same headlines. Hardware prices are skyrocketing, component costs are soaring, and graphic cards are getting prices that look more like a mortgage payment. And then these massive studios are having these massive budgets that are then collapsing under their own weight. And whenever these price hikes happen, it's really easy for the gaming media and the internet to point an angry finger at all of the corporate executives and talk about spreadsheet greed. And there may be a part of that is true, certainly, but I don't think we can completely walk away from any personal responsibility for those things happening as the consumer. Time for a little bit of a reality check, I think. The public, that means the gamers, the enthusiasts, people like you and me, we are actually partially responsible for the kind of corner that the industry has been backed into in a couple of ways. So think about what we have collectively demanded for the last 20 years or more. Look at the way video games are reviewed. Look at the YouTube ecosystem, where the absolute second a new game drops, you are met with a flood of pixel comparison videos pitting the Xbox version against the PlayStation version against the PC version. And we've spent decades hyper focused on the graphics as the primary metric of whether a game is good. And because we demanded it, the industry chased it. That's how this works. But now we've kind of slammed into this point of diminishing returns. In economics, the point of diminishing returns is where you keep putting massive amounts of money and resources into something, but the actual improvement that you get back gets smaller and smaller. So we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars to push these things like particle physics and hyper-realistic lighting and individual strands of hair that trend towards photorealism. But the cost to actually manufacture that hardware that is going to pull that off and to develop those games has kind of broken the consumer electronics pipeline, but also the game development pipeline. I'll give you a perfect example of this. So a couple of years ago, I decided to dig out and replay the original Assassin's Creed, which came out all the way back in November of 2007 for the Xbox 360. And I played this game that came out, close to 2 decades ago now. And I was completely blown away by how good it looked. It looked amazing. The art direction was incredible. The soundscape was so well done that the whole space just felt alive. It felt like you were actually standing there in the space. And I really enjoy that experience just as much as any modern, like, multi-$100 million graphical remaster, because the graphics didn't make the game great. The creativity and ingenuity of the creators did. And somewhere along the line, we shifted our focus to like the bleeding edge of tech, and things like the core gameplay and the pacing and the art of the game were kind of pushed to the backseat. And I'm not saying that the pursuit of technology advancement is like evil on its own, but I do want us to recognize that we did kind of ask for this. We demanded this like arms race for graphics, and now the bill is kind of coming due. And these companies are have invested in this system that is able to produce this, but it's producing it for profit and without the soul that it started with. So where do we go from here? That's the question, right? Anybody could tell you what I just told you and bring you to this point of it's bad and this isn't great. But where do we go from here? I really believe that the answer is already sitting right in front of us, and it's being built over and over by indie developers so often. So what's different about indie developers? Indie studios don't have a AAA corporate like blank check for making it. They can't rely on photorealism to hide a boring game because they can't afford to create photorealism. They operate under a lot of technical and financial limitations. And so what they have, what indie studios have that the AAA studios don't, is limitations. And historically, limitation is this catalyst for human creativity. When you can't rely on a graphics card to do all of the heavy lifting, you have to start asking different questions like, how do I make this world look really good with a distinct art style instead of just the highest resolution? How do I make this game unforgettable through the mechanics and the story and the world building without being able to rely on how far I can render the game in the distance? These limitations make the game creator go back to the basics of what made gaming great in the first place. And so I do think it's time for the AAA studios to take a step back and start taking notes from the indie space. And there are far more important elements to this art form of video games than just pushing the tech to the edge of how far it can go. Even the dedicated PC enthusiast crowd, which has historically always been the ones pushing for the highest graphical fidelity, is starting to realize that they can't afford to keep up with that end of the tech race anymore. Mostly they've been crowded out by the data centers and the race for AI, which is another thing, that AI isn't pushing itself into the space. People are pushing AI to be used in every space. And that's exactly what's happening. So the technology isn't inherently bad, but it is being pushed by a lot of people. And some of those people are the consumers that are asking for it. So I think the hope for the future of video games, it probably isn't going to be found in the next $300 million sequel. It's probably not going to be found in the next remaster that pushes everything forward graphically. I think it's going to be found in teams thinking the indie way and using limitations on purpose to rediscover the humanity and the artistry and the fun that made us love video games in the first place. The game list this week is rather short, so we're going to look at new releases and then some indie games, and then look at kind of what's happening in the subscription space. Kind of trying out a few different ways to group these games together and really make it more useful to you. The new releases this week, yesterday actually, the Star Fox Switch 2 remake came out. This is received almost universal praise. It's a remake of the N64 game. And it looks fantastic. Looks like it plays really well. I did play a little bit of the demo. I'm excited to get this game. It's also priced really nice at $50. I think this might be the way forward for Nintendo. I'm hoping that they're kind of reconsidering the $70 game price point, but also recognize that that is probably a price point that's here to stay for most of their mainline games. Another game coming out is Rhythm Heaven Groove, which is a first-party Nintendo game that is like a rhythm action game. It's built around precise musical timing and then these really fun little animations. As a musician, this one looks like a lot of fun to me. I feel like rhythm games. It's called Rhythm Heaven Groove. That's coming out this week. Not a lot of indie titles coming out this week that I am aware of. One that I talked about last week that just came out is called Axel Quest. It is a pixel art type side-scrolling platformer. I played it for a little while. It is actually on sale. It's under $5 on Xbox. And so if you want to support an indie developer and play a game that's actually pretty challenging and I found to be pretty fun, I think definitely recommend playing it on Xbox. I found the controls to be pretty awkward on the PC, but Axel Quest is one to check out there. And then under subscriptions, we've got a few changes that'll be happening over the next week or so. For the Nintendo Switch Online, the EA Sports title FC 26 had a free game trial that I think just ended, but you can still get the game for like 80% off on the eShop until like July 1st. So PlayStation Plus has 12 major titles that are being removed from the catalog in early July. Usually they'll tell you what all of those are in your PlayStation Plus game list, like, hey, play these before they leave. Some of them include Risk of Rain 2, Cursed to Golf, and Roki. Xbox has some free play days that go through the 28th of June. That's tomorrow. That include Blades of Fire, which is like a dark fantasy action adventure. You'd be able to play it for a little while and decide whether you want to buy it. House Flipper 2, which is kind of a fun design type sim. And then there's also one called coming to Game Pass on the 2nd that is called Speedrunners. And that's a multiplayer like platform racer coming on the 2nd of July. That pretty much does it for today's show. A shorter gameless segment than usual. We're kind of getting past all of the main releases from June, and a couple more will come later in July. We will be taking off next week for the podcast. We'll not have an episode on the 4th of July. Hopefully you're having a wonderful time with family and friends, especially if you're in the US celebrating 250 years of America. I think I'm going to be making a couple of changes to the podcast format, mostly good changes. So if you have things that you've really enjoyed about the podcast, if you listen on a regular basis, send me an email and let me know what are the things that you've really enjoyed that serve you well. What are the things that I can do better? Are there things that you want to hear more of, less of? Send me an email at thisisthegameadventure@gmail.com. I'm also thinking about starting up a monthly email to send out some of like game recommendations, some questions and some answers, and some other like unique ways for us to build community around the podcast in particular. So if you have any ideas for like what you like to see in that type of email that gets sent out once a month or so, let me know what your thoughts are on that. I'm open to ideas. I've really enjoyed doing this every week. Like it's been a lot of fun to do it. But it's also a little bit of work. And so I want to make sure that I'm investing in this in a way that actually serves you, the listener, well. So reach out to me and let me know what those ways are. And I will see you in 2 weeks. Same time, same place.